It's Donald Trump's Ukraine. Are you listening moment? The president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, who was the very first to defend the president when Robert Mueller's report revealed more than 140 contacts between the Trump campaign and Russia, is heading to Ukraine to dig up dirt on the Democratic frontrunner and his family. It's a story you have to hear a few times to believe. On the very same morning, Donald Trump bestowed the honor of a double insult nickname on a man who beats Donald Trump in early head-to-head polls, Sleepy, Creepy Joe Biden. We learned from the New York Times that Rudy Giuliani is heading to Ukraine to meddle in two foreign government investigations. He'll reportedly meet with the country's president-elect to, quote, urge him to pursue inquiries that allies of the White House contend could yield new information about two matters of intense interest to Mr. Trump. One is the origin of the special counsel's investigation into Russia's interference in the 2016 election. The other is the involvement of former Vice President Joe Biden's son in a gas company owned by a Ukrainian oligarch. Of his caper, Giuliani tells the Times, quote, we're not meddling in an election, we're meddling in an investigation, which we have a right to do. There's nothing illegal about it. Somebody could say it's improper, and this isn't foreign policy. I'm asking them to do an investigation that they're doing already and that other people are telling them to stop. And I'm going to give them reasons why they shouldn't stop it, because that information will be very, very helpful to my client and may turn out to be helpful to my government. So the next time someone asks you how bad things are here in our politics, you can tell them they're so bad that the current president publicly depends on foreign governments to prop him up. All this as Trump bears down on Biden, who has clearly taken up residence under his skin. And there's reason for Trump to worry about Biden. Polling averages have Biden up 7 points in head-to-head matchups with Donald Trump, the largest lead of any Democrat, hoping to beat Trump in 18 months. Last night on Fox News, Giuliani talked about going to Ukraine.
All I want the Ukrainian government to do is investigate and don't let these people buffalo you. And that's what they're trying to do. It's a big story. It's a dramatic story. And I guarantee you, Joe Biden will not get to Election Day without this being investigated. Not because I want to see him investigated. This is collateral to what I was doing.
Just let that sink in. All I want the Ukraine to do is ... And that is where we are. After 2 years of Donald Trump trying to convince the American people he didn't work with a foreign government to dig up dirt on his political rival, Donald Trump is now announcing ahead of time that his lawyer is going to work with the foreign government to dig up dirt on a political rival. And that is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. With us on set, Donny Deutsch, host of Saturday Night Politics here on MSNBC. Who do you have tomorrow?
One of probably the stunning example of greatness is the beautiful Nicole Wallace. I want to say, everybody out there, if you like Nicole Wallace on Deadline, you'll love her on Saturday Night Politics. She's there because she's such a good friend, and she's helping me get my show off the ground.
It's a great show. It's a great show. I'm excited about it. Former Republican congressman from Florida, now an independent, David Jolly at the table, plus Ashley Parker, White House reporter for The Washington Post, former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance, and Frank Figliuzzi, former Assistant Director for Counterintelligence at the FBI. Frank, we sat here for about 15 minutes before the show started trying to figure out how I could say on family-friendly television, how the bleep is this happening? So I'm just going to let you try to answer it. How the bleep is this happening?
Boy, that's a great question, because we have to ask ourselves, is this the same Rudy Giuliani who cried foul when the U.S. Department of Justice accepted information and intelligence from former British intelligence officer Christopher Steele? Is it the same Rudy Giuliani who bemoaned the fact that George Papadopoulos was talking to an Australian diplomat and the Australian shared that with us? And now apparently it's okay for him to do this. Lots of questions here, Nicole. Emoluments clause. Is he receiving a thing? Will he receive a thing of value from a foreign government that helps Trump get reelected? At his prompting, are the Ukrainians going to do something they would not have already done and therefore provide assistance from a foreign power to a presidential reelection campaign? Who's paying for Rudy's expensive trip over there? Is it coming out of campaign funds for the president? Lots of questions here, all of which I think is going to take us down a rabbit hole that we don't want to go to as a nation, which is that it's okay now for us to rely on, seek the help of foreign governments, even adversaries, when we get a president elected.
Joyce, don't we have Rudy Giuliani's answer to the question Frank poses, whether or not it's something of value? When Rudy Giuliani says this, I'm going to give them, the Ukrainians, reasons why they shouldn't stop it, because that information will be very, very helpful to my client. Rudy Giuliani has already said in advance of the trip, and I guess this is a legal strategy that you have to pay extra for, confess your crime on Fox News, and then it won't be found a crime when a special counsel is appointed to investigate it.
You know, apparently this administration continues with its strategy of it's not a crime if you do it in front of the public's eye. But this is a very curious situation. Whether it's criminal conduct or not, I think the devil is in the details, as Frank points out, and this is in progress. It bears very careful watching. But just to take a step back and think about how absurd and how bizarre it is that we now have an American president, through his personal emissary, going to a foreign country to ask for a criminal investigation. If there was a reason to investigate, I feel confident the FBI and American law enforcement would be more than up to it.
Well, and David Jolly, after William Barr's performance last week, why would he think he'd meet any resistance at the U.S. Justice Department?
The fascinating thing to Joyce's point is Donald Trump and his attorney, Rudy Giuliani, are asking the Ukraine to do something that not even Bill Barr has the audacity to do, which is to investigate incidents of public corruption by former Vice President Joe Biden. Our own Department of Justice, if there was reason to investigate it, would, but there is not. So they are relying on a foreign country. And, you know, we frame this as Rudy Giuliani. He is a direct agent of Donald Trump.
Correct.
This is Donald Trump. This is the Trump administration and the Trump campaign asking for foreign assistance, again, to investigate a former U.S. Vice President that even our own Department of Justice will not investigate.
Ashley Parker, top Democrats reacting today. Here's Judiciary Chairman Nadler and Chairman Schiff.
I haven't read the details, but my reaction is we've come to a very sorry state when it's considered okay for an American politician, never mind an attorney for the president, to go and seek foreign intervention in American politics.
It's just appalling. And his defense that he's not seeking a foreign government's help in the election, just an investigation. Yes, it's an investigation designed to affect one of the candidates they fear the most, Joe Biden. And I think it's reprehensible.
Ashley Parker, there's almost an exhaustion that comes across in those two responses that, you know, we just got through a 2-year-long investigation into conduct that is at least recognizable in this willingness, this openness to aid, political aid in an American domestic political campaign context. And now you've got the president's lawyer. We got away with it once. Save yourself the step of investigating us. I'll just tell you about it ahead of time. Where are we?
Well, one of the president's sort of chief attributes, to be honest, is his shamelessness and his audacity and his willingness for him and the people around him to do stuff that a lot of reasonable people, based on sort of norms and societal rules, absolutely would not do. So you've seen this all along. You've seen the president, come out in the campaign and say, Russia, if you're listening, release the emails. You've seen the president when he came under scrutiny for that Trump Tower meeting that his son-in-law said, well, wouldn't you have wanted to get opposition research on your opponent? That's just normal. And so this is a president who has crossed a number of red lines repeatedly, has paid very little political price, has faced very little blowback from his own party in Congress. And so it's not surprising that his lawyer would go ahead and sort of continue that trend of sort of being shameless and doing this stuff sort of out in the open and in public view.
Donnie, I concur with everything that Ashley said about Donald Trump's comfort with shameless conduct. What I don't understand is that the reason he could never acknowledge Russia's malevolence is because it would undermine his victory. Now he's publicly saying, I can't beat Biden on my own. I can't do it. I need a foreign government to help me beat Biden. If the whole direction of U.S.-Russian foreign policy was rooted in his insecurity, his fear of acknowledging that he couldn't have won without Russia's interventions, how is he so down with Rudy Giuliani going over there and saying, I can't beat Biden without the Ukraine?
There is the sense of fraudulence. And the tune that you just played is something the Democrats should hit hard. Your reaction to Jerry Nadler was exactly mine and Schiff. That's the scary part. That's where Trump is winning. When you start to, here you have Jerry Nadler, and he's saying that it is such overload, the despicable conduct, the despicable characters, that it is becoming norms, and we have a rogue presidency, and there needs to be rage, there needs to be fear at this point. There can't just be now the Dems, very left brain, you know, yes, you need Nancy Pelosi with a calm hand, but there needs to be rage. We have a president sending over his hitman to basically say, I'm going to get dirt. And by the way, the whole thing is investigating on Biden is proven false already. It's off by a year. The timing is off by. There is nothing to investigate. What he's talking about, Biden getting involved with an oligarch, there was somehow his son was making money off a business deal. They're a year apart. There's just no there. But there is no depth that these people won't go to. And I've said it many times on this show. Trump is doing what the worst players and actors in the history of mankind has done. He's taking every single step. And how far and how bad does that go? Every other country, they say it can't happen here, it can't happen. It's starting to happen here. And between Barr and this latest instance, it is a new level of dictator playbook. We're getting there, folks. And there's, at the end of the day, going to be only one thing that changes it, and people voting. That's it. That we're moving to a final dance in November of 2020, and the American people better get it, because 4 years of a guy who doesn't have to rerun again, take wherever your mind can take you in a bad place, and we can go there.
Frank Figliuzzi, with all of the fog and all of the lies that come from the president, Rudy Giuliani, sometimes the truth tellers get drowned out. But one of the truth tellers spoke out today, former FBI General Counsel Jim Baker, who talked about enough being enough with all of the lies and all of the smears around the origins of the original Russia investigation. Here's former FBI General Counsel Jim Baker earlier today.
Honestly, there was a point in time relatively recently where I just became sick of all the BS that is said about the origins of the investigation, and I just got fed up with it. Yeah. This incident, the Papadopoulos information, is what triggered us going down this path.
Okay.
Again, it's against the backdrop of a dump of emails over the summer that were attributed by various entities to the Russians in one way or another, and other things going on that summer, and this thing then lands in the middle of that.
Right.
That's what then focuses us and triggers this course of investigation.
Frank, it seems like we can never share enough original source information about the truth of the Russia investigation. Your thoughts about Jim Baker speaking out and what he had to say?
I applaud him speaking out. Again, the FBI, particularly in counterintelligence, is a culture of secrecy. But this time in history calls for us to set the record straight, and I think that's what Baker is trying to do. And in that regard, our Attorney General is doing just the opposite. So he's put out there this notion that he's looking into the predication of the special counsel inquiry and the Russia CI investigation. Well, get it over with. Get it out now, because the longer he takes doing this and implying there's something wrong with it, the more the public will think there is something wrong with it. I predict we're never going to see an end to the AG saying he's looking into it, because he doesn't want to see it resolved.
Joyce, I want to just always bring this back to the man who spent 22 months looking at the questions that emerged from that original suspicious conduct from Papadopoulos, which was the match. Robert Mueller found after 22 months that his investigation established multiple links between Trump campaign officials and individuals tied to the Russian government. Those links included Russian offers of assistance to the campaign. In some instances, the campaign was receptive to the offer. So most parents recognize patterns. We learn pattern recognition. If our kid always lies about brushing their teeth, they go to the dentist, and we're not surprised when we hear they have cavities. This White House always lies about its contacts with foreign governments to cover up, perhaps, its dependence on assistance, that they can't take their case to the American people. Do you fear that's where we are again now with the Ukraine?
You know, sometimes it takes cavities a while to show up. You might not see them at the first visit, but down the road 6 months or a year later, suddenly they're more apparent. And Mueller was very careful in his report to point out that he was not, in the first instance, making a decision about collusion because it lacked a legal definition. He was looking at whether there was between Russia and the Trump campaign. I don't think that we can say that enough because the president continues to say no collusion. And that's not what Mueller found. He did find a, as you say, pattern of this repeated outreach from Russia. And there was maybe some parallel play by the Trump campaign, but no evidence of an agreement. So with that backdrop, we should carefully scrutinize what's going on in Ukraine and be very careful, always keeping in mind that prosecutors who decide that there's not enough evidence to prosecute today might view that decision differently 6 months down the road when new evidence comes to light.
Ashley, I want you to try to wrap all this up for us. I mean, you know, when you talk about a White House that spends as much time and energy wanting to investigate political enemies as this one does, you're so far beyond the norms that norm busting doesn't do justice to sort of wrapping that conduct in the right frame. I mean, this is a White House that spends precious little time thinking about or talking about spreading democracy, precious little time sort of being in touch with any sort of granular details of a policy process, but a whole lot of time and energy punishing their enemies, shuttering the windows of the White House so no one can see in, figuring out how to grind the axes of the people who've made them mad. What's your take on the state of play as this extraordinary week wraps up?
Well, this is a president, again, who has sort of in a number of ways chipped away at democratic institutions to the point where stuff happens every day that would kind of end the political career of any other politician. And that was sort of what you got at with that exhaustion. And we're even seeing that level of exhaustion just with the sort of clashes between the White House and what's going on in Congress with not turning over any documents, making them fight for anything with subpoenas. In addition to what you mentioned, I just wanted to add one more thing, that this is also a White House that in many ways has not learned its lessons or has frankly learned the wrong lessons. You have a president who in theory should be so grateful to finally be out a little bit from that Mueller cloud, that 22-month investigation. And it's almost as if he seems to, on the one hand, miss that opponent. He's still attacking Mueller, still going after them. And he's allowing, you know, either tacitly or implicitly, again, you know, his top emissary, Rudy Giuliani, to go on and behave in a way that could cause another scandal in another cloud that could embroil his presidency.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.